So I saw you posted at some point that one of the topics that you don't get tired of either talking about or maybe consuming is philosophy. So I want to hear about like what got you into philosophy generally. What is interesting from your perspective about? I'm always interested like how do consumers understand philosophy and what's the appeal there? So how did you get into it?
That's a really interesting question. I guess simply by being an intellectually curious individual. I'm not someone who has ever studied philosophy formally. I don't know that much about its history. Of course, I know certain names of certain philosophers, but I would be lying if I said I've done a lot of in depth reading of the stuff that they put out there. But I'm someone who's infinitely curious about the world and how it works. And I think the most interesting thing in the world, for all its complexities, actually is the human species. I think that human beings are infinitely interesting. And I think that if you are curious about human beings and humanity and how we work and function individually and collectively, then naturally you're going to take interest in various aspects of sociology and psychology and philosophy and religion and politics, because all of these things really are about how humans and human societies function. It's the same reason why of the sort of main sciences in school, the one I was most interested in was biology. I was interested in chemistry and physics, and I was good at math, but biology itself is just infinitely fascinating. I mean, not just humans as well, but I mean other animal species. But human beings were just we're such an interesting organism. We're such an interesting being. Whatever someone's worldviews are of how we came to be and how we came to exist and how best we should function as individuals and as societies and as nations. There's such a diverse range of views and conflicts, obviously, about all of that. But I think we have to admit that it's fascinating. And the truth is, no one really understands it. We have ideas, we have hypotheses, we have theories, we have different schools of thought, but no one for sure has all of the answers. Some things certainly seem to work better than others, but if I would like to think that I understand human beings better than the average person. That's not really saying much. Uh, like there's so much that I still don't know. We all think that our worldview is correct almost by definition. Everybody thinks that they are right. And we can't all be right. There's over 8 billion of us and lots of different opinions on every single thing under the sun. And none of us totally understands it. And most of us don't even understand ourselves. We understand ourselves to some degree, but if people truly understood themselves, then everyone would be happy. Everyone would be successful. Everyone would achieve all of their goals. But the fact that they don't suggests to me that actually most people don't really even understand themselves and their motivations and their goals and what they should do and how they should do it. Otherwise, we'd all be kicking butt.
Yeah, what's interesting about that answer is I understand that you were a computer science major at Oxford University, and so it was interesting that like your answer included all these other topics. So what motivated you to go into computer science, and is that still a major interest of yours all these years later?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll be totally honest with you. And if I could go back in time, I probably would have studied a different subject. But the reason why I chose computer science was at the time when I was, 17 years old and I was deciding what to study at university, I didn't really I didn't know what I was going to make a living doing. I mean, I wasn't even making music at that time. If someone told me I was going to go on and become a professional rapper, and then later down the line, I'd make podcasts, which didn't even exist at the time, and I'd write books and do all of this other stuff, like it wouldn't even have really made sense. So I didn't know what I wanted to study. I knew that I was good at science. I was good at maths. I have a lot of interest in computers and technology, and I still do. So, given the options available, I thought, okay, computer science sounds like it'll be up my alley. I'm interested in computers. I'm interested in tech, interested in the future. It fits the way my brain works and, my sort of natural strengths. So, let's go for that one. And I also knew that it's one of those degrees where, um, assuming I would go on and have a quote unquote normal job, then it's a good degree to have. It's probably more useful than the vast majority of them. So I thought, okay, it certainly won't close any existing doors, but maybe it'll open some as well. So I'll go for that. And I didn't particularly enjoy it. I enjoyed my time at university, but I didn't really like my subject. Perhaps I would have enjoyed it more at a different university. In Oxford, it's not, computer science isn't all that practical. Everyone thinks, you're going to be sitting in a computer lab all day, programming and learning about AI and graphics and all this stuff. No, it's very, very theoretical, very mathematical. In fact, for the first year, half of the modules and classes I did were the same one that the mathematics students were doing. Um, and then, yeah, you learn some programming as well, but it's not that hands-on and practical. But it did, it used a lot of brain juice, and it certainly made me even better at problem solving than I already was. So, it wasn't, I don't really have regrets, but if I were to go back, I would have done a different subject, I think.
That's so funny. I have almost the same story because I started out as a computer science major for the exact same reasons that you just articulated, because I didn't really have a good idea of like, what's my thing? What do I like? A lot of young men at that time in life, and that it was the same exact rationale. I was like, well, I'm kind of okay with computers, and I think this would be a living. And I got into it, and it was the first semester, and I started. I think the first class I started like programming in Pascal or something,
Mm.
and right away I was just going, well, this isn't what I want to do for the rest of my life for sure. And so that's the point where I switched to philosophy, because I had been taking a philosophy class, and I went, oh, well, this is how I see the world. This is just like how my brain works. But it was interesting, just like you, I noticed some problem solving skills that you learn, because there's such a parallel, right, with computer science and logic. So it's just funny. I have such a similar story to yours. I want to pick up on a thread that you talked about just a couple of minutes ago, and that is your understanding of human nature. It's been so interesting, like a lot of other people, it's been so interesting to follow you over the past few years, what you post content wise. And at least from an outside observer perspective, I think that's right. And part of what I want to ask you about is, because of your large following, it's like you get a window into a ton of individuals every single time you post, every single time you do like a video, every time you say something, especially like on X, but I'm sure other platforms as well. One of my questions was like, how has that informed how you understand the human population, especially from a global perspective, and also human nature, given that you're seeing just so many more data points than the average person?
That's a brilliant question, and I've never been asked that before in all the hundreds of interviews I've done. Well, firstly, it's important to say that I've been on social media for my entire adult life. I'm 38 years old now, and I've been on social media since 2005. I joined Facebook, no, since 2004. I joined Facebook October 2004. I joined Facebook. Prior to that, I was already on MySpace. I joined Twitter, which is now X, in 2009, YouTube 2006, Instagram, I think 2010. So my entire adult life, I've been on social media in some form. How has it altered my view on humanity? First of all, I would say that I'm glad that I have a lot of real world experience and that I've traveled to so many dozens of countries and met in person many hundreds of thousands of people through my work. Because if I were to base my opinion on humanity purely off of social media, I think my view would be a lot more negative than it is. And that's not because most interactions I have online are bad. Quite the opposite, actually. The vast majority is very positive. I think something interesting about social media, and not a lot of people sort of bring up this point, but it The fact that it's just so open and you have billions of people from all over the globe connected, what's fascinating about it is it brings together and it gives access to people who normally would have no business um, communicating with each other and who normally in the real world would not come across each other. So, on one hand, I've met and connected with literally millions of people around the globe of different ages, different backgrounds, different socioeconomic classes, men, women, just all sorts of people all over who we share certain things in common. I would say through across like 80 to 90% of people who follow me on social media, there's this through line mentally and in terms of where people's hearts are that unites people. It's not about race or ethnicity or age or location or the job sector they work in, any of that stuff. And I know this is true because I've done real world meetups. I've done them in I think about over 12 different cities now, ranging from Dallas, Texas, to Cape Town, South Africa, to Dubai, United Arab Emirates, to London, UK. I've done real world in person meetups with my followers, and everybody always gets on very well with each other. When I do a meetup, you'll have people literally from teenagers up until people in their 60s or even 70s, men, women, you know, people from all over. I've had billionaires, millionaires, thousandaires, negative, however much, like whatever net worth, whatever background, like, and people just come together. There's never any drama. Everyone gets on. In fact, some of the meetups that I've done, there are people who became friends at them. And to this day, they're still friends and they're still meeting up in New York or in LA or whatever. But they actually met at a Team Zuby meetup, which is kind of crazy. So it's incredible that you can connect with so many like minded people who maybe in the real world, if you just pass them in the street, you might not think you have much in common. But then through the power of the internet and social media, you find you have a lot in common. And then on the flip side, you also run into people who I'm like, in the real world, I would have no interaction or engagement with somebody like this because they're just so far removed in so many ways from the way I think and the things that I believe and my values and my way of communication and so on. But everyone is just thrown together. And because of the algorithm, you see stuff from like everybody. It's not just the people you follow. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this in your time on social media where you just come across something and you're just like, wow, I didn't know this type of human being existed. And sometimes I'm curious and I'm clicking. I kind of go through this rabbit hole and I'm just like, I've discovered whole sub communities and whole like types of people that I'm just like, wow, I have never in the real world come across somebody like this. And so you just really get to see the entire spectrum of humanity, the good, the bad, the familiar, the unfamiliar, the kind, the evil, and just everything in the middle. So I'd say it's really just sort of expanded and verified to me the diversity of our species. Not in the superficial sense. I'm already very aware of that, but on the deeper sense of the way people actually think or don't, and the way they, the what's on their mind. Because for whatever reason, on X in particular, but on all socials, on Instagram to some degree, on I don't use TikTok, but I'm sure there on Facebook. Um, People share a lot more than you might expect, which is kind of interesting because I think if you were to go back to the year 2000 and you were to explain to someone the concept of social media and say, we're just going to like let people share whatever they want, photos, videos, opinions, texts, and we're just going to let them share what they want and interact with each other. I think most people would have thought like, why would anyone share anything? Like, why, like, what's the appeal? Why would I want to just share my opinions with the world? And then lo and behold, it turns out there are hundreds of millions, if not billions of people who are extremely fascinated to share their ideas and their opinions and to see what other people are saying. So that's the social part of the media. And like so many things in life, it's a double-edged sword. It has some massive upsides. It has some very significant downsides. But ultimately, it's a tool. And I do think it's true that social media has altered human behavior. But I think it's revealed it more than it's altered it. So, for better or worse, in addition to the real world and our real world interactions, it also shows another side of humanity, which I think gives us a more holistic picture.
I think that's great. I mean, well said. And social media. So I want to maybe I can ask it this way: you're involved in so many different projects across different fields, and I mean, you have your music going on, you have the social media, you have your podcast going on. You wrote a book on fitness, Strong Advice. Do I have that
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah.
So there's all these projects that you're involved in. How do you see like a what would be like the unifying thread among all these different, like, what's the passion, what's the motivation, what gets you up in the morning, you're like, okay, today, given the diversity of these projects, I want to, how, fill in the blank, well, how would you put it?
Yeah. So, my mission since I was 18 years old has been to use my words and my actions to some extent to positively impact and inspire as many millions of people as I can. So, actually, if you look at the through line through all these disparate things that I do and that I'm involved in, they all share a common goal. And it's actually all doing the same thing in different forms. All of it is using my voice, using the power of my words to uplift, inspire, encourage, and just try to nudge people overall in a better and more positive direction. Sometimes that is very direct. For example, my book, Strong Advice, that is a very direct way of helping to improve people's lives, mindset, motivation, nutrition, physical training, how to get better on that front. Something like a podcast or an interview like this, I would like to think someone will listen to this and it will encourage them to think better. There might be something I say, something you say during the course of the interview, which is just that little gem they need, just that little piece of motivation they need, just that little shift that makes them go, oh, you know what? I haven't thought of that thing that way. Maybe that's a better way to adjust my worldview. So that's all it is. I do this exact same thing when I'm rapping. I do the exact same thing when I'm speaking on a stage. I do the exact same thing when I'm posting on social media or when I'm making a video or I'm writing a Substack article or I'm making a book. It's all the same thing. I'm a communicator. And thank God I'm able to communicate effectively and proficiently in a few different mediums. And so I used to just think I was going to accomplish this all just through music. So when I started out with music, my plan was just cool. I want to inspire and motivate people through my music. And then over the course of time, I still do that, but why limit myself? If I were just a rapper and I just focused on making rap music, then there are many millions of people who know me now and who like what I do and who I've been able to inspire or help in some way, shape, or form over the years who would not have discovered me if I had limited myself only to that one medium. But instead, by doing a range of different things, it stops me from getting bored and it scratches sort of my itches. But also, it's just cool. There's, different people consume things in different ways. Different things resonate with different people. People have different interests. So I don't want to just artificially limit myself and my potential. I would like to, if there's from the 14-year-old young man to the 72-year-old woman who shares some of my values or vision or just sort of ideas and worldview about the world. I would like them to know who I am and be able to reach and make their life better in some way. I've met people who my work has made their life better in an extraordinary, very significant, tangible way. And then there's others who it's just, you know what? So a common comment I get both online and offline is, you know what? Like, you're just like the most consistently positive person in my feed. I'm browsing social media. It's just doom and fear and anger and political polarization and this and videos of bad things happening. And then I always just pause on your posts, and it's just something that makes me think or makes me smile or makes me just want to keep going. And man, when you're in this space as well, like people really bear their heart to you sometimes. Like I've had not even dozens, hundreds, if not thousands at this point of messages and comments I've received from people where they really just go into detail of like how much you've impacted and inspired them. Um, and I don't take that lightly. I experience it in the real world as well when I'm traveling around, and I've had people come up to me and just, man, like I've had so many very humbling, sometimes a bit frightening in the sense of um, just realizing how would I put it? How much weight your words can have. I think in the world of social media and podcasts and all that, it can be, because when you're a creator, you make something and you put it out there, and for you that's the end point. But for everyone else, that's the beginning point. So once I finish recording this interview, I'm done. I've done my bit. But no one's even heard it yet apart from you. And they might not even listen to it when it's released. It might be a year later. It might be 2 years. It could be, it exists out there forever. And sometimes, I've had people who they're like, man, there's something you said on this podcast, and like it affected me so much. It changed the way I was thinking. And they'll talk about a podcast I recorded in 2019. And I'm just like, wow. And I'm meeting this person right now. He's standing in front of me in 2025, and he's telling me something I made 6 years ago, like shifted his life in a better direction. And I'm just like, wow. I've had 5 different people in 5 separate situations come up to me, and they all did the same thing. They showed me a before photo on their phone. Before photo when they were 100 pounds heavier than they were at the time I met them. So I know at least 5 people, at least 5 people lost over 100 pounds after reading Strong Advice. And they all came up to me and they're like, dude, like you just made it click for me. This is what literally, like, they want to show you, right? Like, this is what I used to look like. And they have the photo on their phone and they're like, yeah, I started training after reading your book, and, I cleaned up my eating and so on. And I'm just like, man, like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that until this person is standing in front of me. And there's just so many of those stories that are out there. And it's beautiful because sometimes you kind of question why you're doing the things you're doing. Like I'm very clear on what my vision is, but sometimes you don't really know how it's affecting people. You can see numbers, you can see views, you can see view duration, you can see download numbers, you can see impressions, you can see likes, you can see comments. But those are nice vanity metrics. It's nice to say, hey, cool, like my account got 1 billion impressions last year. But did it really impact people? Did it really help anyone? And then you have those type of moments, normally one-on-one, and it's just like, oh, okay, fantastic. Like I'm glad that random tweet I wrote in the bathroom was able to get you through this difficult period.
I think that's great. So for viewers and listeners, if you want to take a look at some before and after pictures, you have those on the sales page for your fitness book. So I'll link to that in the show notes. But drawing on a couple points there, I think it's so important because it's not a given that someone will, number one, use the platform they have for something positive. And you and I can probably think of examples of people who have a pretty decent platform, but they got there mostly by negativity or something that's just not as positive. And so I think that's really important. I want to ask, is a sub theme for your mission, what's important to you, is part of that like resilience, overcoming challenges? Because I'm thinking of when you started in the music business and you were just doing, not, I don't know about door to door, but let's say hand to hand CD sales. You were hustling out there, you were doing the entrepreneurial thing. And for so many years, just, that was obviously like a struggle. So you have that sector going on. And then you have your fitness interest, which anybody who's done anything in fitness, whether it be weightlifting, running, whatever, knows that you got to overcome a lot of mental and physical. So I'm wondering, you have all these sectors in your life where you sort of voluntarily went into these things that have big challenges, and you have to mentally, physically overcome those sorts of things. So, one, what has been the role of resilience and fortitude for you as a sub theme? And then, second, like, what are you applying that to now?
Yeah, great question. Before I answer it, I want to touch on something you just said about how people use their platforms. And something that's really important is to remember that what you win people with, you win them to. And on top of that, it's good to build an audience that you genuinely like. There are a lot of public figures who don't actually like their own audiences. They don't like their own followings or fan base because they've built it based on, as you said, putting out stuff that is negative or which is just hype or drama or gossip. And so you naturally attract people who are attracted to that and who crave more and more of it and demand more and more of it for you. And you can end up over the years resenting your own audience. And I've seen people in that position and it's not good. Something I'm most proud of is the fact that I genuinely like and respect my followers. I'm sure there's some bad people in there who, hit the follow button, but for the most part, I know I have a genuinely good audience, and I really like that. Um, about the resilience, I mean, resilience is insanely important. I generally believe that most people who fail at things, and this can be anything in life, uh, from a diet to a relationship to a project to a career. I think most failure is actually just giving up too early. I think that's the most common cause of failure. I don't know the exact statistic, but I believe the majority of podcasts that are ever started never get past the fourth episode. So if you launch a podcast and you just make it to episode number 5, you are already in the minority. You've already outlasted most people in history who have ever started a podcast. And I'm sure the same is true of workout programs, diets, YouTube channels, starting to write a book, pretty much anything. Most people just give up too early. Um, what was the second part of the question?
Well, so you have fitness, you have your experience really hustling, being an entrepreneur. And I should mention, like, being a hustler, being an entrepreneur, those are sort of the sexy terms for it. But the other side of those things is getting embarrassed in public and, having people look at you and going, hey, look at this, it's not working. What are you doing? And you have to kind of push on and be like, I have a vision for it. I know right now it's not what I want it to be ideally, but I want to press on. So my question is, those times in your life where you didn't have the public support, let's say, that you do now, you really had to overcome a lot and apply that resilience when maybe, well, a lot fewer people believed in you. What are you applying that fortitude, that resilience to now that you are, let's say, more supported than you were before?
Um, well, I'll answer the second part first. And what am I applying it to now? Well, I've been a dad for 9 weeks, so that's an entire new chapter of my life. I've got a baby son now. I have a wife and a son. 2 and a bit years ago, I was a single man, a bachelor, and you're living a certain life, and then now I'm a family man, and I have dependents, and I have people who are I need to look out for, and that's going to be the case for the remainder of my life. Like that's a permanent change, and it's embarking on an entire new mission from the ground up, which I haven't done before. So I'm sure there's going to be moments where resilience and plenty of other things that are in my toolkit and maybe even not yet in it are going to have to be used. But I'm loving the journey so far. So that would be the most obvious answer. Something I did was thinking while you were asking that question, and I think it's important to say, and this is not any type of like fake humility, but I recognize in this world that in many, many ways, I am very privileged and very fortunate, very blessed. And I'm hyper aware that there are billions of people on the earth right now, and billions of people who are no longer with us, who have really had to bear through stuff that they didn't voluntarily choose. I generally, like, if I think of my biggest challenges and struggles, these are things that I voluntarily chose to go into. So yeah, it was difficult selling my CDs on the street for 15 years. Yeah, it was difficult to build this or to do that. And yeah, it's hard to deal with certain things. But in the grand scheme of like the human experience, I have very little to complain about. Even when things were not going my way, even when things were not difficult, I've always been healthy, able-bodied. I don't have any sort of disabilities. Even in my wider family, I'm blessed to come from a wonderful family. My parents have been married almost 50 years. We haven't been hit by these awful tragedies and things that so many people go through involuntarily. And so I think part of what drives me is wanting to, I guess, use those blessings to help and bless and inspire and encourage other people. If someone wants like a true story of grit and determination and hardship, like I don't think I'm not the best person for that, because there are many people out there who have lived lives in many ways which have been far harder and more difficult than mine, and I know people like that. I've interviewed many of them. Um, but at the same time, it's all a matter of perspective. I think where there's a philosophy podcast. I mean, I think the human experience in general is always difficult. I don't think it matters who you are, whether you're in the first world or in the third world, or you're a man or you're a woman, or you're able-bodied or you're disabled, or you're tall or you're short, whatever, all across the spectrum. I don't think anybody's life is really easy. I think it's easy to look at other people's lives and go, oh, that person, that guy, that gal, like they just have it easy. Um, but if you really like were to go into people's psyches and to really learn about them and what they deal with and learn even about their history and their past and their experiences, there are many people who on the surface it looks like, oh wow, um, that person just seems to have it easy, must be nice. But if you were to really like know what's going on in their life or some of the things you've been through, you might be like, oh wow, actually, like I didn't realize that they'd been through all of that. And some of the nicest and kindest people in the world have been through some really awful, horrible stuff. And even for the people who haven't, life itself is just it's challenging. And I think it's supposed to be. I don't think it's meant to be easy. I think actually one of the biggest problems, we have a lot of problems in the modern Western world, but I think one of the biggest, like, how would I put it? One of the underlying lies, which I think leads to a lot of discontent, is I think there's an idea that life is supposed to be easy. And I think a lot of people get really upset and angry and disappointed and depressed when they realize that it isn't. And I don't really know where people got the notion that life is supposed to be easy. I can't look at any time period in human history and be like, oh yeah, like life was just really easy for those guys in the 1700s or the 700s or 700 BC or the 1970s. Any time, like life has always just been, it's always been difficult. I mean, by historical standards and by global standards, we're like absolutely in the 1% in terms of quality of life and ease of basic survival. But even then, that doesn't mean that modern men and women have it easy. I don't think most people feel that way. Even in countries like the UK or US or Canada, like some of the richest countries in the world with the most opportunities, I still don't think like most people would be like, oh yeah, like life is just easy. It's just a cakewalk. It's difficult. Um, and some of that is involuntary and some of it is voluntary. Many times the things that give us the most meaning are things that we voluntarily choose to do, which actually make life harder in certain ways. Um, like, I mean, I sort of touched on an example earlier, right? Like, I could say that my life was easier when I was just a single childless man. In many ways, you could say, well, life was easier, but um, if you're just optimizing for ease, then cool, okay, yeah, never have a relationship. Certainly don't have children. don't do this, like don't start a business, don't go to the gym, don't I mean, but then you lose meaning, you lose aspects of health, you lose aspects of potential happiness. All of these things you now don't have the capacity for because you've kind of just chosen the quote unquote easy route every single time. And then lo and behold, in the long term, that can make your life a lot harder. If you choose the easy route all the time, if we just narrow it down to health, for example, say you're the person who, okay, I'm just going to eat whatever tastes good and I'm just going to, I'm not going to exercise regularly. I'm not going to take care of that. I'm not going to get sunlight. I'm not going to have good social interaction. I'm just not going to like care about my health at all. I'm going to drink. I'm going to take whatever substances I want. Maybe in the short term, that is comfortable and perhaps even fun in a very fleeting way. But what about a few decades from now? What about when you're in your 60s, in your 70s? Are you going to even make it to your 80s? That's when life now becomes really, really difficult. And you might be thinking, oh, when I was younger, I should have taken better care of myself. And I think that's one example, but I think it's true of pretty much anything. I think it's true of relationships. It's true of money and finances. It's true of career. It's true of pretty much everything. You kind of have to pick your hard. It can be hard now. It can be hard later, but it's going to be hard.
I think that's such an important point because, yeah, exactly right. I mean, if you play the short term easy game, it's going to have consequences, hard consequences later on. I think that's exactly right. If you play the long game and you do the challenging things, and you have on a long enough timeline, that's going to make things, generally speaking, I don't know if easy and hard are the best categories, but better for you. It's going to be more of a flourishing life, I think. And to your point earlier, I think one of the most interesting test cases for, you don't know what someone is going through internally, regardless of sort of the externals that you might be witnessing, was so your friend Chris Williamson talks about a quote from Elon Musk. So he quotes him a lot, where Elon was asked something, I don't remember, but he said something like, a lot of people think that they would want to be me. I think if you felt it from the inside, a lot of people would not trade places. I think if you actually were inside here and you were experiencing what I'm experiencing, you wouldn't trade places. And I think that's a really important point, because it's someone who, again, the externalities, you think, okay, you can have anything you want, etc. But on the inside, that's going to be a different experience. And so it leads me to a question. I know you got to sit down with Elon and talk with him, and it was such a helpful conversation. It was brilliant.
Thank you.
Um, what what would we as viewers not understand about how that interview got off the ground, the logistics involved? I can just sort of like imagine um, what it was like to get the time, and what was that experience like? What did you learn from the experience on even kind of like a second order level? What are the takeaways?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the thing that might surprise people is the way that it happened was very similar to how most of my interviews happen. In fact, he DM'd me first. um, Elon actually DM'd me. This is, gosh, January or February 2023, and we were just chatting in the DMs after he started following me. I remember I was like the 180th person he followed on Twitter or something. And we were just chatting, and then I was like, "Hey, I've got a podcast. Like, I'd love to interview you on it sometime. If you have a chance. I know you're busy." And he just wrote, "Sure." I was like, "Oh, sweet. Okay, cool." And then it was just a matter of logistics, like any other interview. I think some people think I had to go through all these layers and huge hoops, but I just asked him like the same way I ask most people. Um, what did I learn from it? The thing that I most learned, well, I don't know how much I like explicitly learned that was brand new. It was more like a reinforcement of things I already believed. Number one is that you can just make cool things happen. That's been my entire career, has just been doing cool things that nobody told me to or gave me permission to. Just like, hey, you know what? I want to do this thing. I'm going to do it. And you can do that. Um, I think a second one, I'm going to go give a few. I think a second one is that you might be surprised by the fact that the people who you are inspired and motivated by, you can also be an inspiration and a motivation too. When I met Elon, like he was as happy to meet me as I was to meet him, which was pretty cool, right? It wasn't like just like this one way, oh my gosh, like it's Elon. It was like, Zuby, great to meet you. Like I've been, he enjoys my content as well. So it's kind of like, oh wow, like this is cool. Like he sees my stuff just like I see his stuff. And I think sometimes that surprises people because when someone is so far ahead of you in certain aspects of life, you might think that the inspiration can only be one way. And actually there could be something that you do or a quality that you have or something that you're doing that they see and they find that really interesting and motivating. Another one was just I was impressed by his humility, just his humility and down to earthness. I've said before on another podcast that if there were somebody in the world, if there were a man in the world who would quote unquote have a right to be arrogant, I'd say it's probably Elon. Like, he's got some accolades under his belt. He's done some pretty impressive things. He's got a bit of cash. Like, I think a lot of people, if you gave them $400 billion and they were the CEO of all these things and had all this, like, I don't think most people would handle it very well. And I think a lot of people would think that they are just so superior and that other people are beneath them and they don't need to give anyone their time or their attention or whatever. And he's just not like that. Like he could be, and it would kind of be understandable. And he's not. Like he's, friendly, down to earth. He was very friendly to obviously I had a filming crew who were there with me and he was just cool with everyone. And I know other people who have met him and know him and, most people are like, yeah, like he's down to earth, obviously he has to live his life in a certain way because of his level of fame and wealth and so on, right? He can't just be totally normal in everything, but in many ways he's just kind of a normal guy. And something I really like about Elon, this goes beyond the interview, but I love the fact that he repeatedly does the quote unquote impossible. I think it's so important in the world, in a nation and in society to have people who are just doing things that that most people don't even think are possible. I think in the past, you had explorers who went to different continents and sailed around, and you've had people do, head out to space and go to Antarctica, climb out. But I think so many of the predominantly male endeavors, which are completely breaking new ground, most of that happened before we were alive, right? Like it's already happened. There's no new continents to discover. There's no if you wanted to kind of have do that, it's well, someone's already done it. Someone's almost anything you can think of. It's well, someone's already done it, and they've probably done it faster than you, and they probably did it younger than you. But I love the fact that he's just you know what? I'm going to make a successful electric car company. I'm going to make a rocket company. I want to try to help blind people see and paraplegics to walk. And I'm going to just buy Twitter. I'm just going to buy it, right? Who does that, right? I don't like the way this thing is going. I don't like the censorship. I'm going to put the money where my mouth is, and I'm just going to buy this thing. Even with what he tried to do with Doge, obviously some people liked that, some people didn't. But even just to be look, this $37 trillion debt or whatever we have, this waste in government spending that's happening regardless of the administration, I'm going to try to step in here and I'm going to try to do something. I'm going to try to audit this and cut it out. And it turned out that one truly was impossible. So
yeah, on the resume.
I love the fact that he was you know what? I need to try something easier, like going to Mars, trying to cut government spending. That is actually the guy who could do all this other stuff. That was the line. That's where the buck stopped. He was just you know what? This isn't possible. So I think that says a lot.
That's hilarious. Yeah, the one thing that he's not as successful at, right? Mars, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
That's hilarious. And that was, I don't remember what podcast number that was. So for people viewing and listening, Real Talk with Zuby, you have close to 400 episodes at this point. You've been doing this for a number of years, and you have so many great guests. I do want to talk about it. So one of my main questions is, you have such an eclectic group of guests over the 400 episodes. It's pretty amazing. Um, my question is, you have had you've had some, let's say, controversial figures on there,
Mhm.
and I'm wondering, that and who probably in some respects like share some of your core beliefs, and in other respects probably don't share some of your core beliefs. So I'm really interested in, how do you think about getting guests to come on your podcast? I have a suspicion that you have a similar kind of philosophy to it, but I want to hear from your perspective. Like, how do you understand that, again, kind of like second order meta messaging, where you're talking to someone and you're probably aware other people are going to maybe criticize you for even having this person on, and that's regardless of politics. Maybe someone from the right is kind of mad because you had someone left leaning, or vice versa. But it seems like you just want to talk about substantial, in-depth topics with people from such a broad perspective, different careers, different interests. How do you understand uh, guest getting, the kind of guests that you want to have on your show?
Interesting question. The most basic thing is just, is this someone I want to talk to? That's actually the most, is this someone I want to talk to and I think I could have an interesting conversation with? Like, it's mostly that simple for me. It's not, I think there's a real danger of when you start worrying too much of how people might react or might respond. I mean, that's why so many people never end up doing anything, because they're so worried about how people are going to react, and what if someone says something negative, or somebody doesn't get this, or they misinterpret that and that. That's an infinite rabbit hole, and people are always going to have criticisms no matter what you do or don't do. Not everyone is going to quote unquote get it all the time. Even people who do genuinely like you, they might not really understand. Like, I don't really know why you want to have that person on, or why you want to talk to this person or whatever. Um, but at the same time, like, these are all free interviews. Like, if there's ones you don't want to listen to and there's ones you do, then that's totally fine. There are many things in this world that I'm not interested in or that I don't like, but I'm not going to spend my time, you know, writing to Spotify and record labels about all the songs and artists on their platform that I don't like, or go on YouTube and start spending time watching videos I dislike. I find that mentality a bit strange, and also I think I think people used to understand that if you are an interviewer, your job is to interview people. I don't remember interviewers in the past like getting stick for quote unquote platforming, I don't know, freaking Saddam Hussein or Fidel Castro, or, well, like, people would interview like literal dictators, um, or like serial killers, right? Like, I mean, right? And no one would be like, "Oh my gosh, that interviewer is like, that means that they're, uh, you know, validating everything that they do and everything that they've said." And it's just, no, it's an interview. And look, I also think ultimately you can learn from anyone, especially someone who's achieved success in some way, whether you like them or not, you agree with them or not, you're totally on board or not. Like, um, you can learn something from people. And I think every single interview I've done, I can say that I learned something from, and I would think my listeners got something from. Even if it's like, you know what, I agree with this, or I don't agree with this, or I like this aspect, but I don't like this aspect. I've learned a lot in this life from people who I don't even particularly like. Sometimes I don't even particularly like their work, but I might like how they've done it. I might like how they've branded it. I might like the way they promote their work, which I don't like. Um, I might like, right? There's always just something to learn from people, and I think I think people artificially handicap themselves in a lot of ways in this life. But I think one of them is being a little bit too closed minded, or dare I even say, sometimes overly moralistic in terms of um, what they feel like they are allowed to learn from. Um, I like to say, eat the meat, spit out the bones. And I think there are some people who just like, nope, the meat is poisoned. If you eat it at all, you're just going to take in all the poison. And you know what? Maybe there are some people where that's true. Maybe there are some people who are not sophisticated enough, or their brain doesn't work in a way where they can compartmentalize it. Um, it's like this idea. I'm sure you've heard this concept of separating the art from the artist. So if a musician or a painter or an actor, if they say in the real world, in their personal life, if they do something bad, if they do something criminal or just something unethical, does that now poison their art? Does that now mean you should never listen to their songs? You should never look at their paintings? You should never watch their movie that they directed? Some people will say, yeah. And you know what? Maybe there is a line where it's like, ooh, maybe it's a little too blurry, and I should just stay away from that. But I think in most cases, we're sophisticated enough to go, okay, if I listen to this song or if I watch this movie, this is not a wholehearted endorsement of everything that the director and the producer and all the actors in it, like, this isn't a wholehearted endorsement of their entire lives and their beliefs and their lifestyles. And maybe just because things are so politically charged in recent years, it's become more difficult for people to do that. But I generally think it's a mistake. Like I said, I think eat the meat, spit out the bones, take what you find useful. If there's some stuff that you find, whether you just don't think it's correct or you think there is something immoral or unethical about it, I think you can reject that part. You can say, you know what, I'm not taking on board that message, but here, I like all these other things, and actually what this guy just said about marketing is totally right, but I don't like what he said about this other topic. So, why not learn from it?
What's been interesting on this side, where I'm associated in some ways with philosophy, I teach philosophy, I know a little bit about it, is that from my perspective, like, I'm with you. I have just this can't really help it. It's a curiosity. It's just in me. I'm interested in what people think about the world, the way they see the world. I may not always like their answers, or even just, agree. Like is probably not the right word. Maybe I don't agree with some of their answers, but it's interesting to me how people see the world. I think curiosity these days is almost a superpower. I think people are hungry to be associated with other people who have sort of like a wonder and curiosity about their, at least that's been my experience. And I'm interested to, maybe this could be one of the last questions, is you've been interested in critical thinking. I know you taught a course on critical thinking. You have a natural curiosity. From your experience, are people hungry for substance, for in-depth questions, more maybe than in your experience in the past?
I think so, yeah. I think that the rarer it becomes, the more refreshing it becomes. And I think particularly in what I call like the woke decade, which we'll say runs from about 2015 to 2024-ish. I'd say that was kind of like the real rise and the peak. And it's not gone now, but it's dissipated compared to where it was. If you just think back to 2020 or 2021, things were a lot more intense in that regard. I think that just due to the level of deception and overt and covert political correctness and censorship and self-censorship, people just like being afraid to, just say pretty basic things. I think that led to a massive hunger or thirst for people who were willing to just put their head above the parapet and cut through that. I think I've certainly been a beneficiary of it, whether that was during the whole COVID era or with my viral deadlift video where I broke the British women's deadlift record, or lots of the things I say on podcasts and so on. Um, my goal, generally speaking, is has never been to be, intentionally provocative or controversial. I'm not someone who's just contrarian for the sake of it, and I'm just going to say things to like intentionally just I just want to make people angry. I'm not going to like lie about things, but I think when when you're in a culture or a society and it seems like most people are lying and evading the truth, simply saying something that is true becomes controversial. Um, and that's really what we were living through for several years, and maybe we still are to to some degree. So yeah, I do think that when I look at, I really despise the term content creators because it's so I don't know. It's just I don't really like that term, but for lack of a better term, when I look at creators who are doing well online in a sustainable long term way, for the most part, I do think it's people who are more authentic and willing to tell the truth and willing to confront some of the difficult things head on, willing to even just have conversations, because there's a lot of people who are not willing to, they're not even willing to have the conversation. They think that just having the conversation is somehow immoral. And I think that has led to it's led to a lot of opportunity for a lot of people. So I don't know. What does that say about society? I think there's a lot of intellectual cowardice that has been going on, particularly over the last 15 years. I think that we could solve most societal and cultural problems if everybody was just a bit more honest, and we could just, if people just, what, like let's just talk openly about this. People are going to have different perspectives. There are going to be some hurt feelings. Some people are going to be offended here and there, and so on. But it's like, look, we're all adults, and in the West, in particular, in the USA, in particular, there is this concept of freedom of speech. So if if people have freedom of speech on paper, but in reality they're not able to use it, then what value does it really have? And I look at a lot of social issues, and I'm just like, man, can't we just have an honest conversation about this? Like, does it have to be a left right thing? Does it have to be hyper politicized? Does it need to be, as soon as someone says something you don't like, you call them a fascist or a Nazi or a racist or a communist? Like, can we just like tone all that down and just talk about the issue and work it through? If you can't talk about an issue, you certainly can't resolve it. And I see a lot of issues going unresolved because they're just not being talked about in an honest fashion. I see it happening in my home country of the UK. I just see it happening all the time. The politicians are not leading with honesty because, they're just trying to get votes. They're trying to make people feel good and feel happy. So they're just sometimes outright lying, like just saying stuff which is objectively false just because, it's maybe going to win a few votes here or there, or it's going to make them look like a good guy. And it's tiring and it's exhausting. Not everybody sees through it, sadly, but I think increasing numbers of people do. And I do think when you just allow people to speak freely over the course of time, you get closer. You get closer to the truth. You might not reach it perfectly, but I think I view it like going from low resolution to higher resolution. So you start with a very fuzzy picture, and then you allow the conversation and dispute and uh, debate to go on. And hopefully, over the course of time, you've at least got a slightly sharper picture of what's going on. And then maybe, if we're mature enough, we can find some potential solutions.
That's absolutely right. I think it's so important that people like you are someone who agree or disagree. You can trust to give at least an honest, authentic response,
Thank you.
and to say what you really think about things. Maybe this can be as brief as you want it to be, but so many young people right now, when they're asked, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do for a living? They say like you said, content creator or influencer or something like that. So if you're going to speak to young people who give that sort of answer, what's the honest good news, bad news about that?
I really like your questions, man. You make me think. First of all, my natural response to that is quite different from most people's. I think most adults would hear that and they'd cringe or they'd roll their eyes or they'd think it's unrealistic or something. I kind of think that's the wrong response. Um, my response would be, well, firstly, I'd probably ask why if I were talking to someone one on one. But I think the core thing I'd want to hammer into them is on the downside. It's not a downside, but just the reality check is, hey, that's a way more work than you might think it is. But on the practical side, it would be like, okay, well, you want to live your life in service of others. What value are you going to give people? Like content creator is such a gigantic bucket. Do you mean you want to do silly TikTok dances? Or does it mean you want to create a philosophy podcast, or you want to write books about a certain subject or something? I mean, what is it of value that you want to offer people? Because ultimately, to even achieve success in that, you need to offer a product or a service to people that they find value in. I think a lot of people, when they maybe the reason why it tends to trigger an eye roll is because normally when people give that type of answer, or when someone says like they want to be famous, it's normally just coming from a place of ego and a place of selfishness and self. It's egoistic. It's self-gratifying. They're thinking I want to be adored, right? That's often what they're thinking. Whereas the thinking should be, hey, I want to impact, inspire, encourage, help, entertain. There's nothing wrong with entertainment. Thousands or millions of people. And I think it's the same thing in a way, but it's a very different framing, because one of them is based on what you're going to give to others, and the other is what can I get from people? I want to get their views, get their attention, get their love, get their validation, get their admiration. I don't think that's a good goal for anyone to chase, partly because it's infinite. um, but I think if you think, okay, what do I have to offer? What talent, what knowledge, what skills, what is it that I have to offer people that I can give them using these platforms? And lo and behold, due to the wonders of capitalism or the free markets, or however one wants to think of it, that's actually how you end up being successful. If you whether you're on YouTube or you're on podcasts, or you write a book or you create something and it genuinely makes the life better for a million people, you'll probably be a millionaire. Probably. Um, if you make a product or a service that helps that many people, like the monetization part it's not going to be all that difficult. So um, that's a much better way for it to think of it. So if I met a young person who told me that their goal was to be a content creator or an influencer, that would be the way that I'd frame it. I'd let them know that, yeah, it is serious work. Don't assume that this is like an easy route. It's not. But I'd say, yeah, you can do it. But you have to offer people something of real value. And I'll tell you one last point on this is real value can be quite a subjective term. I'm sure there are people out there on these different platforms where you or I might see what they're putting out, and we're like, I don't really find value in this. But it doesn't even matter. Like, as long as somebody does, um, and you're not doing stuff that's like unethical and bad, then I'm like, man, more power to you. I don't need to understand everything to think it's like legitimate. Um, I don't, you've got like these streamers who just play video games and shout at the video game, and they're raking in like huge amounts of money, and they've got like hundreds of thousands or millions of people watching them play video games. I don't personally find that compelling. But you know what? I also don't find watching golf compelling. But like, I'm not there like mad at golfers or mad at golf fans because I'm personally not interested in golf or cricket or badminton. Like there's millions of people who like these things, or darts or pool. Like I think I find it pretty boring. I don't mind actually playing most of those myself, but watching it, I don't really find it that compelling. But who cares what I think? Millions of people like it. So get in where you fit in. There's such human diversity that you can really find like niches and areas where you just find your people, and good for you. I think that's one of the huge blessings of the internet and social media. I love the fact that it's just diversified and what's the I always struggle with that word. Democratized
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
market in that sense. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's good.
I've heard you in at least another interview talk about the importance of framing. I think what you just said is like a great test case for that. Zuby, I could talk to you for another 2 hours at least. I really appreciate the time. It's flown by for me. So interesting. I had, obviously a stack of other questions. Maybe at some other point we can get to those, but I so appreciate your time. Can you tell people where they can find you, the different, platforms, and what you're working on, what's coming up?
No doubt. Yeah, thanks, Jared. It's been a great interview. You've asked some really good questions. Everyone can find me at Zuby Music. I'm on X, Instagram, YouTube, same handle at Zuby Music, Zuby Music. If you want to check out my music itself or my podcast, everything's available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you are. If you get lost and stuck, just search Zuby, Zuby, and I'm very easy to find and would be happy to connect.
Awesome. Yeah, go check it out. I love the content. You are very thoughtful in what you put out there, obviously, and from my perspective, like you said, it's a good. A lot of it is just so positive and uplifting. So it's been a blessing, a benefit to me, especially. So thanks again.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.